Thank you all for coming, and you're attending a STEMxx Chats seminar here, and it's STEMxx Chats. Really what we're doing is building an ecosystem of empowerment, and our public events are open to absolutely everyone. As an organization, we're focused on advancing women in STEM, but we invite everyone to help us in this mission. And we really want to break down barriers between career stages and locations and propel positive change makers. And so we do this through a variety of ways, as you can see listed here, and as many of you know who have been attending our events. One new initiative that I'm excited to tell you about today is what this event is also part of, which is this effort to be able to expose and characterize the personal dimensions of careers that we really don't hear about in a purely technical context. And so this has been one of the big missions of STEM Chats all along, and we are tackling this in different ways. Soon we'll be launching a project to really compile these insights and these stories. We're really happy that events like this, many people are hosting in their own local communities now as well. Interviews and career panels like we've been doing, which is really awesome. And we want to harness those insights and compile them so that more people can learn from them. So to that end, we're going to be on our website. We'll update this as we go, but we're going to have different forms people can submit there. And we're going to have a portal where people will be able to submit their stories. So stay tuned for that. I just wanted to give that preview because this is a new edition, and we're really excited about it. Our next event is going to be one of these career decision panels. This is just a little public service announcement. So November 18th, in 2 weeks, we'll have a career paths about consulting options from people in STEM backgrounds mainly. Some of whom are in more STEM-related consulting firms than others, but can stay tuned for that. And we'll also have our last interview of Top Women in STEM in December with Tina Seelig. So you can check out that registration. Again, all of this, the links are on the website for the registrations, and for the latest and greatest, you can follow us on social media. And so with that, I am very excited to introduce to you Dr. Paula Hammond. And Dr. Paula Hammond is the David Koch Chair of Chemical Engineering at MIT. She's at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. She is a fellow of the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, which is really, for those of you who are maybe in high school, haven't heard so much about the National Academies. A National Academy is really an incredible honor. And to have the trifecta there, science, engineering, and medicine, this is really an incredible honor to be joined by Dr. Hammond. She's received AIChE, the American Institute of Chemical Engineering's Margaret H. Rousseau Pioneer Award, and she's an expert in polymer science, nanoparticles, and drug delivery, just to summarize her research a little. So Dr. Hammond, we're really honored and grateful to have you here with us tonight.
It's great to be here. I'm really glad to have a chance to talk to people today.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, and we're tuning in interesting circumstances, and I'm glad everyone is taking a little break from the election craziness to be able to focus on something here.
Absolutely. I think we all need to take a deep breath and of course apply some self-care afterward too, because it's been an exceedingly stressful period of time. So shake it all out and talk about some things that look to the future.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Yeah. And I guess as a bit of a roadmap, I would love to talk a little bit about your journey, the journey from where you are to now, starting as far back as you wish to go. but then kind of, again, what it's like as the department chair, as a professor at MIT, and with your research, as well as your reflections, lessons, advice. And then at the end, we'll open it up for Q&A. And the Q&A is going to be going, so to the audience, feel free to chime in with questions as you have them. So the Q&A is open, and there's an upvote function, so you can vote for questions that you would most like to be answered there.
Excellent. Oh, I'd be happy to talk about how I got engaged in science and engineering, and just a little bit about myself. First, I should say, first of all, I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and actually grew up in the Motor City, and I think had a really nice sort of upbringing. My parents were each the first in their families to get college degrees. And so they were very focused on making sure that we also went on to college. My older brother is just 2 years older than me. My younger brother's within 2.5 years younger. And so we grew up a tight trio. I was always very interested and excited about science, but I also loved reading and writing a lot. In fact, I read a huge amount growing up, and became a bit of a bookworm, and really got into science fiction, among other things. So right around junior year of high school, I had already decided I was going to be a writer of children's fiction, because I really loved, reading fiction at that time. And I had a lab class. It was a chemistry class that actually had a lab in it. It was the first time that I had actually had a chance to take a lab. At that time in Detroit, a lot of students were essentially going to Catholic schools, which provided a nice alternative to the Detroit public schools at a reasonable kind of price point. And so I was at a small all-girls Catholic high school. And, my teacher was the first teacher in science I had who was a woman. And she was a woman chemistry teacher. Her name was Mrs. Herr, interestingly. And I know, exactly. And she noticed how much I was into mixing chemicals and sort of experimenting with things, and how I stayed after class. I helped her clean up. And she finally said, "You should think about chemical engineering." And I asked, why not just chemistry? And she said, well, you want to combine the chemistry with, you're really good in science, but also math and physics. You can actually do some really applied things with chemical engineering, and there's a big need for engineers. So I took it to heart. I looked up what chemical engineers do, and I decided to apply to schools where I'd be able to take a dive into it. So that was sort of the beginning. I got excited about the idea of being able to combine molecules in a very unique way and create something new that didn't exist before. And that to me was really compelling. When I started looking at schools, I decided to go to MIT as an undergrad, because when I visited, I felt like I was surrounded by other people who were equally as fascinated. And that made me feel more at home. Growing up, because I was very much, I was relatively shy, and I felt that I could really find my own place at MIT. I found myself to be much more expressive and much more open. It was a great experience too. It was a hard experience in the sense that I was used to getting good grades in high school and when I was in middle school. But when I went to college, MIT presented my first really, really true challenge. The classes were tough, and I had to get used to not always being the one who was going to be at or near the top of the class. I needed to sort of say, okay, I'm surrounded by other really engaged students who are really focused and working hard, and that's good because that's going to make me more inspired to work hard. But I also learned how to use only my own internal gauge as a way of understanding how well I was doing. So the whole idea of comparing one person to the other just doesn't work. You never really, you end up feeling less about yourself than you should. And in the meantime, you're not doing yourself any service. You're not doing anything good for yourself. However, if you understand how much you've learned one day and you sort of set the goal, okay, I'm going to try and understand one more concept tomorrow. Have I learned a new concept? Have I learned something, or have I been able to, tackle something that's been hard for me? And that was how I kind of managed through that process of getting used to a more challenging environment, was just by keeping that in mind and by working with my colleagues, with my friends. So friends would get together and we would just learn from each other and share how we understood things with each other. And that's also a really important skill to have, because science and engineering requires collaboration, and you need to be able to learn how to teach each other. Now, after I got my bachelor's degree, I was engaged to be married by that time. I had met another engineer, and we decided to work for a little while. Although I was thinking about graduate school, I wasn't sure about it. And we ended up moving to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And in Fort Lauderdale, which is the land of sunsets and all kinds of beach and everything else, we got settled at jobs at Motorola, which is at that time Motorola had just put out cell phones, and they were doing pagers, which people don't even buy anymore. But at that time, that was the big thing, was their telecommunications.
And this is coming from a chemical engineering degree.
It's coming from a chemical engineering degree, because some of the things that you can do with a chemical engineering degree include being able to understand how to control chemical processes, which include what you need to do to build or construct a number of devices. It turned out with my chemical engineering degree, I was in charge of a part of the manufacturing facility, which was a clean room, in which they were assembling the integrated circuits, or ICs, to the device itself. And there's a lot of kind of chemistry and engineering involved in getting that device put together and connecting all of those devices into a final unit or module. So I was in charge of that, and I was in charge of improving the process for that. The thing that really got me interested in that job was the fact that I had a chance to work with so many different kinds of materials, including trying to solve the problem of how to get the integrated circuit to stick to the gold pad that was a part of the circuit. And this involved a huge amount of adhesion chemistry, understanding what adheres to what and why, and then making sure it was rigid and stable. So that was one example of a problem that we encountered at that time. So what's that?
No, very, very cool. Very diverse problems there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it was a good opportunity to understand what it was like to be a process engineer. And there's a huge amount that you can do. That's one example, but I have friends who went off to work in more traditional chemistry or chemical companies and materials companies like 3M, There are ones who went off to do a range of things in the biotech industry and biopharma, including there are a number of jobs at companies like Merck and GSK and Novartis. After I worked for a couple of years, I realized that I really wanted to dig deeper into the problems, though, and I wanted to understand a little bit more about what I was working with. And I ended up with my husband. We moved to Atlanta, Georgia. He was working on an MBA at the time, and I started working on a master's degree in chemical engineering at that time. And I worked for the Georgia Tech Research Institute, known as GTRI. And that was when I took a full sort of immersion into research. I'd done some as an undergraduate, but here I had a more continuous project. I worked on conducting pads for robotic tactile sensor, so that the robot knows what it's touching just through a rubbery adhesive pad. And I also worked on some early kind of versions of degradable polymers for a biodegradable plastic. So it was a contract research lab in polymers that GTRI had at the time. So I had these diverse projects again. And that was a lot of fun. at the time, I was able to combine that work with getting a master's degree. And I became more and more in love with the idea of designing polymers, these huge, large chain molecules that can actually take on a large number of different properties. You can build them by putting together small units of molecules, and you can get very different properties depending on how you combine them. So this really was compelling to me. And I found out that MIT had a new program in polymer science that was just starting. It was a PhD program. So I moved from Georgia Tech to MIT to get my PhD.
Wow. Back to MIT.
Back to MIT again. And this time I was really focused because I had worked for a little while. I had this sort of really, let's go in, let's get the degree, let's get engaged in the research, get to the good stuff. But it was helpful for me because I was pretty focused during my classes. And I was married. So during the time that I started my research, I had a child in my third year of grad school. What was
that like?
That was really interesting. It was good timing in the sense that I got started on my research, which was designing a polymer that had these really cool optical properties. When you stretched it, it would change colors. And it was an elastomeric material. I made a huge amount of it, and I was at the point where I needed to characterize it. And that was when I found out I was pregnant. So I could do a lot of safe experiments with just stretching and measuring the optical intensity and color change. Went from blue to red to yellow and then back as you stretch it. And I was able to examine the way that the molecules were arranging that allowed these color changes to take place and sort of correlate that to how the polymer itself aligned when I stretched. And that alignment is what caused the colors to change. So I did work on that for my PhD thesis, then had the baby, took a break for 3 months and came back, and then designed a different material, the same idea, but this time it was a material that changed color when you heated it. As you cooled it and heated it, it would go back and forth in color. And these were called chromic materials. At the time, we were thinking about them as sensors and ways to detect everything from temperature to stress fields, et cetera, as a coating on surfaces. So I really loved working on those projects.
Yeah. And the decision to go back into grad school, did you say that was largely wanting to know why something was the case, right? Is that kind of curiosity in how it works?
Exactly. I wanted to be able to do more than just, fix something. I wanted to understand how it works and how I could change how it functions. And understanding how and why something works means that you can then change it and create something new. And that was really compelling to me was, okay, if we can understand how this material works, then I can introduce something else to it and actually change how it works. And so that was really a driver for me. I really got excited about the fact that you can create something and have it perform the function or the role that you were imagining in your mind. And that's really what got me interested in taking on a faculty position too, because the idea is that then you can have an idea, a new idea. And as long as you can get a funding agent or a sponsor to provide the funds for you to do the work, you can do anything that you can imagine that is scientifically based. You can build the argument, you can show the early evidence, and then you can go in and you can actually make it real. And that to me is really exciting.
Very cool. Yeah, and it also makes me think back to what you were saying in the beginning about, you're going to be a writer and got really into sci-fi, right? I mean, being a professor, grant writing is a lot of writing.
That's right. I ended up using those writing skills, actually. So getting really into reading and writing actually paid off. I found that being able to convey to other people what I'm imagining is a really powerful skill. And if you have an idea and you're able to get other people to get excited about that idea. Then they buy in, they want to help sponsor that idea, or they want to work on that idea. You need that skill to get new people involved and engaged in the work, or to get a collaborator who has a special skill that you need to come on board and work with you.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it really seems that if you can come up with good ideas and communicate your ideas, you really can do anything, you know?
That's really true. It really is. It's such an important skill. And it means that it's good to pay attention to how well you are able to write, because writing is a part of that. And it's also how well you were able to describe to other people what you're interested in or what you're doing.
Yeah, very important. Very cool. All right. So we left you in graduate school, and then
yes.
Where do we go from there?
Well, after I finished my PhD, I was, in fact, while I was finishing my PhD, I was thinking about faculty positions, and I started applying to different schools. I didn't apply to MIT, but I was approached by my department head to consider applying to MIT. And that convinced me that I should definitely apply. I was originally avoiding, maybe I should go someplace different or someplace new, but I really loved what I was doing, and I loved the environment, which is a place where it feels as if everyone can really engage and collaborate. And I began to set up a lab. I did a short postdoctoral study at Harvard where I learned some new skills, including assembly of thin films. And those thin films can also have a unique function. And then I started my research lab. And in doing that, we worked on a large number of different kinds of projects. And that evolved into newer areas. And where I am exploring now is actually the use and design of polymers to deliver drugs to the body. And we have work in which we can create extremely thin film coatings on orthopedic implants that slowly release a protein that causes the stem cells that already exist in our body to arrive at the site, differentiate into bone cells, and generate bone so that you can have bone regeneration around the implant. And this is one idea that we've had. Now we've adapted that idea to the coating of a biodegradable sort of material that can be implanted in a place where you have missing bone, like a cranial defect or a missing part of the jaw, something that may happen as a result of a blast injury. And you can take the shape that you need for the bone, and you'll have bone regenerated in that area. That's work that we're doing now. We're actually taking it to, we've been doing it in very simple models, and we use rats for those models. But we have a new collaboration in which we're working with rabbits. And the larger the animal, the closer you get to real life. We're also working on nanoparticles that are small enough to travel through the bloodstream and deliver drugs to cancer cells. In that case, we have to design the outer surface of the nanoparticle so that it can bind specifically to cancer cells without interacting with the healthy cells that are in our bloodstream or in our tissues. And once they reach those cancer cells, the cancer cell takes up the particle. We actually have these particles designed so that they can contain a chemotherapy drug, and they can also contain essentially a molecule silencing RNA or siRNA, which can turn off the genes that allow these cancer cells to resist the drug. So we actually can treat very resistant forms of cancer using this kind of approach. So we've been looking at ways in which we can design nanoparticles to treat disease. We're interested in adapting the same kinds of approaches to see if we can treat infection and other kinds of illnesses.
Very cool. And so that also has a big targeting approach as well, right? I mean, one of the huge challenges with chemotherapy is that it's really nonspecific. It's killing all kinds of cells. So can you talk a little about like the selectivity in your nanoparticles?
Absolutely, because that's so important. When we think about giving a patient a chemotherapy drug, typically it means injecting the drug into the bloodstream or taking it orally. And that drug then travels everywhere in the body because it accesses our bloodstream. However, that means that this poison is coursing through our body, and we end up with these really sometimes pretty terrible side effects. However, in our work, we encapsulate the chemotherapy drug inside a nanoparticle, which acts essentially like a container. And that container is small enough that it can actually travel through the bloodstream. It's about 100 nanometers in size. Which means that it is much smaller than a human cell. And as it grows through the bloodstream, it can actually find its way into tumors because tumors have blood vessels that sometimes are compromised and allow the nanoparticle to get through to the other side. However, once it gets to the other side, we want that nanoparticle to actually bind to a tumor cell. So we treat the outer surface of the nanoparticle with a polymer or a specific protein that will bind to these cancer cells specifically. And it turns out that a lot of these cancer cells will express proteins on their surfaces that can be recognized by our protein. We get a binding event, and then the cancer cell takes up the nanoparticle and therefore takes up the drug. Once inside the cancer cell, the drug gets released and is effective in killing those cancer cells.
Really powerful tool.
We're really excited about it, and we're finding that we can deliver some pretty, amazing drugs that are difficult to use without a nanoparticle because they have too many side effects when delivered directly to the body.
Super important, right? Yeah, it's really exciting, and I think there's a lot of people rooting for that line of research. So cancer is a huge challenge. So lots of promise there.
Absolutely. And we're hoping that we can address other diseases. Some of the challenges are, for example, when one has an infectious disease, that there's a huge amount of inflammation that can take place. So if you have a respiratory infection, and so you have essentially infection in your lung, there's a lot of inflammation that takes place, and it's often the inflammation which causes a huge sort of damage to the lungs that is really the side effect that we see in COVID-19, for example, that can lead to respiratory, arrest and essentially cause morbidity. So we're interested in trying to adapt what we've learned from cancer to see if we can design nanoparticles that can deliver directly to the lung, to see if we can design them so that they can release anti-inflammatory drugs really effectively to that part. So we're interested in that. This is something that we're still, this is sort of the beginnings of ideas when you're talking about ideas with your collaborators and writing proposals for them.
Yeah, very cool. So for the postdocs that are tuning into this, maybe young faculty, I see young faculty tuning in, do you have any advice to share in terms of the progression of your lab and how this has kind of evolved for you?
Absolutely. I found that a large amount of the areas that we're exploring now were initiated either by new collaborations or by students and postdocs coming into my lab and finding opportunities to expand the work into new areas. So when I first started my lab, I didn't have any biomaterials work at all. We worked primarily on the self-assembly and the thermodynamics of self-assembly. And then we moved to energy and electro-optical material systems, very much like my PhD. But I actually, as I was approaching tenure, was very curious about getting involved in the biological sciences and how our materials would interact with cells. And that was really propelled by having a couple of graduate students who came to me and said, I propose that we work on this project. And, I had a conversation with this other grad student down the hall, and they say we can use this for gene delivery, for example. That those kinds of things lead to conversations. And I ended up with conversations like that right around the time I was approaching tenure that led me into these very different areas. But this can happen at any point in your career. You end up having a conversation with a faculty member who says, if you can do that, maybe you can also have a look at this problem. Can you do something with this? Or you end up with, again, that student or that postdoc who says, hey, I just had this really amazing conversation with XYZ down the hall or XYZ at the neighboring institution, and they have this problem I think we can solve with our technology. So I think being able to enable the members of your lab to explore is going to really pay you back as a faculty member. You want it to be connected to the core of your own research program, but you want to be open enough to be able to hear what those possible ideas are and let them grow. And for those of you who are still graduate students and postdocs, now is you're probably working on a number of exciting projects, but you may see an opportunity for something that is a very interesting adjacency to the work that you're already doing, in which you have an opportunity to expand the work. And that is definitely a way in which you can leave a mark and also create some new paths for you when you start your own career.
Very cool. I love it. Awesome. So this was a great, fast through the trajectory. And I think we got a lot of valuable lessons and advice within that too. So thank you for that. Perhaps now we can do just a little bit of a snapshot and where you are now, what it's like, what do you like most about your job, about your current role?
Oh, those are great questions. Let's see. So where I am now, first of all, I've been working in the biomaterials area for some time, and as you know, I joined the Koch Institute for Integrative Cancer Research. That happened in I want to say it's about 12 or 13 years ago, and was able to be a part of that group that first joined in 2010 to open our new Koch Institute. And that led to a huge amount of collaboration and a much deeper dive into the biology of the work that we do. So now I've learned a huge amount about biology. I've learned even a little bit of cancer immunology, although I am nowhere near an expert. I've learned how to learn enough to understand how to apply our tool set to a problem. I've learned to really learn a lot from my collaborators, but understand that my collaborators will always know more about their space. And therefore, we use each other to help leverage the science and the engineering. In part, it's important to know what you don't know and to learn from others. I am very interested in translation of some of our work. Right now, we have some areas in which we are beginning to look at that, or at least take some closer moves to that, both in the cancer work and a collaboration with people at Brigham and Women's. We're beginning to look at a system that could be very interesting for that. And we're looking at a treatment for osteoarthritis, also based on biomaterials, where we're moving to larger animal studies. So we're trying to think about translation for some of the work, and I'm encouraging members of my lab to help take on part of that. In the meantime, though, when I was just joining the Koch Institute, I was also taking on more administrative roles in my department. I was what is called the executive officer, which is the associate department head, and I was in charge of space and teaching assignments in the undergraduate committee. I also chaired the graduate admissions committee, and those experiences have really been helpful for me. So ultimately, 5 years ago, I was asked to become department head. And after thinking about it, I thought this is really an opportunity to give back to my department. And for me, it has been incredibly rewarding. The thing that I love most about my role as department head is that I can enable my fellow faculty and students to do their work and to do it unencumbered and to really, shine. And it feels great to create an environment in which people are able to achieve what they want to achieve. And you can actually see how rewarding that is for them. And that for me is incredible. What I love about my role and my continued role as a researcher is being able to, I would say there's two things. Being able to make that idea real is still like gives me a huge surge. But seeing my students and my postdocs go on and develop and then launch their own careers, that's just amazing. It's seeing them at conferences, seeing them, receiving awards or going off and publishing papers. There's just a huge sense of passing on the torch and seeing them succeed and seeing them be successful in their lives. And that's something that is incredibly rewarding as well.
That's very cool. And it seems like something that professors often comment on, right? That you wouldn't get in industry is this kind of student interaction and seeing this progression there.
That's right. That's right. It really is like you're building a family, and, you have over time, more and more people who are connected to you in this very unique way. And your research lab creates an environment in which people are able to, excel and prosper. And that's something that makes you feel good.
Very cool. Awesome. You mentioned a little bit about, having a child during graduate school and kind of managing family life throughout all of that. Is there any other advice that you would want to give related to work-life balance or family life at different stages?
Absolutely. I think you can plan, and planning is good, but there will never be there won't be a most ideal time. There will always be some degree of a break that you'll need to take, or some form of disruption, and you just have to embrace that and accept that. It's much less stressful if you just sort of allow for that to be a part of life for a while, because it's okay for life to be a little bit messy and a little bit disconjointed for a while. That's how major events happen in our lives in general. When I was a grad student, I had my son right in the middle of grad school, which maybe people wouldn't choose intentionally, but it worked out well for me. I did take that break, and I was able to come back and make it all happen again. But I communicated a lot, both with my husband and with my advisor, about expectations and what I was planning and what I was hoping and what happens if what I plan and hope doesn't happen, because you can't control everything. So that there was some open communication. With my advisor, we worked out that I would be away for the summer because my son was born on May 27th. And I was able to have that summer. Really I didn't try to write 2 papers and, create an entirely new proposal. I figured it was good if I just, was somewhat cognizant of what was out there. So I tried to keep up with a little bit of literature, but frankly, not a lot, because there were times when I wasn't sleeping at all, because new baby.
The full-time job.
Full-time job, exactly. But that was great because I was able to get a rhythm. I was able to let things kind of meld into some sort of form where I felt like I had the rhythm together. Childcare was a project. Part of my project was how to arrange childcare for when I return. And I did learn a lot about the different options. I made a lot of use. MIT has an Office of Family Work and Life. It had a slightly different name at the time, but I used them to help me find different childcare options. And when it was time for me to go back, we had somebody coming in like 9 to 5. So I had already, from work at Motorola, I'd already learned how to regiment my time. I became really, really efficient. It's just like, here's my planned experiments. Let me go in, bang, bang, bang. You just have to do it. And what's interesting is that, in that process, I felt good. I felt good about, my child. I felt good about, life in general. I didn't feel like things were perfect, but I didn't feel like I had to be perfect. Just there, and just being as able as I could be, and that ended up working well because, messiness, as I said, is a natural part of life. But I really enjoyed those years, and James and I, we as he grew up, we had reading every night that we did together, reading stories until at age 13, he's like, "Mom, I think we should stop."
Wow, you had a good track record there. 13.
I had a good run. He was humoring me for at least a year and a half there. But we took time together. I did find that planning and setting time aside very specifically helped me. So the sort of period of time, that corner of the morning where you're getting dressed and ready, and then you're headed to daycare or whatever, there's a little chatting that goes on. And then there's like this period that's the dinner hour, like from the time of pickup from daycare or after school to bedtime, where it's getting the plates on the table and getting dinner ready, and it's talking and hearing what's going on during the day. And that kind of set a pattern for me, so that even after James left the house, I still had these periods where I tend to take breaks for myself, between around 5:30 and 7:30 or something like that. And it's just me getting my meal together and sitting back and watching the news and having some quiet time. So having, a child present in your life can be a blessing in that it introduces a rhythm and forces you to take a time for spending time on something that's not work, that is about yourself and your personal life. So I found that to be really a good experience.
That's great. Yeah, and I think that the personal aspect is so important, right? And just being able to maintain good relationships, and I mean, even high school students with your parents and college students with your roommates. We need these interpersonal relationships, and it's worth putting a little time in there, right?
It's really worth it, and it's so important. The way that it stays connected is by having the ability to talk and to exchange and to feel that connection and to set time aside. And that's one thing that me and my husband would take vacations regularly. All of those things. Vacations really important. All of those things are important. Even if you're really intense in your work, you have to take the time out and have some real, and for me, schedule playtime, because if you schedule it, then it happens. That was my discovery.
I love it. I feel the same way. If it's not on the calendar, it doesn't happen, right?
Exactly.
I love it. Awesome. Great. Well, I am really excited to dive into the Q&A a little bit, and I'll give you the floor at the end if you have other reflections, advice you want to close with as well. But we have a good question. We have several good questions, but the first question here in the Q&A, what advice do you have for creating and maintaining fruitful research and/or teaching collaborations?
That's a great one. I think actually, again, this is a little bit like the relationship thing and the raising children thing, but essentially creating a relationship with that collaborator, being present, setting up regular meetings, connecting, those actually lead to really successful collaborations. One of my I have a couple collaborators that I've been working with for years and years, like Angela Belcher and Daryl Irvin. And the things that work are that we have shared students. We get together for meetings. We talk about where things are going. And we toss ideas back and forth at each other informally through emails. Hey, look at this proposal. This might be great for that XYZ idea. Hey, my connection over at the Gates Foundation said that They're really interested in ABC. Maybe we can put in for that. And we just, I think, like to spend time together. And that, I think, is also important. At first, when you get involved in the collaboration, you're getting acquainted and so forth. You want to provide an opportunity to create a space where you can each equally kind of contribute. You can each equally kind of talk to each other and introduce yourselves to each other's worlds so that you can understand what's possible. And that might happen by having a couple shared group meetings or bringing your people together with their people and having at it with ideas and really building a sense of understanding of what the other does. Respect is always incredibly important. And with respect and that understanding, there are all kinds of things that you can do. So for me, those are really key, and having fun with the collaboration. Those are the ones that last, are the ones where you are moving somewhere really exciting and interesting, and there is some, sense of joy about the work itself.
Very cool. Awesome. Can you talk about some of the biggest challenges you faced as a faculty member and how you overcame these?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I think that there have been a few times in my life where I felt, oh my God, what's going to happen? This is really tough. I think earlier in my career, I felt that I had this incredible set of research accomplishments and ideas. And I found that there was another much more senior person who had a very similar idea and was working on it. And, I thought, oh my God, I'm going to get scooped. This is the end. And what is my student going to think? What are we going to do? This is horrific, right? And however, we actually looked closely at our science and at the other evolving science. Said, okay, there are similarities and differences here. We feel the pressure of okay, are we going to get scooped? What's going to happen? But what we're going to do is we are going to weave our story the best that we can and introduce the most unique elements of our findings. And, we're going to put it out there. And, to some extent, you may not be able to get it out there before the other person, but you get it out there somewhat adjacent in terms of time frame. In the end, if what you're introducing is critical and important, then both of you will be cited. And so that's the goal is, okay, let's both get it out there then, because, there's not very much you can control except what you're doing. And what I found was that was not a life-shattering event, indeed, we did both get cited. Over time, we ended up talking to each other about our science and our findings. And I even ended up on thesis committee meeting of one of the students involved in the project as things evolved. So I think for me, that was an experience in trying to manage the stress and manage the process of how to handle this kind of sticky situation, keeping calm enough to get the work done, because you're going to be anxious no matter what, but being able to take that deep breath and go, okay, all right, and tell yourself the world is not over. I will make my way out of this, and I will continue to produce incredible work. And I think if you can just keep your eyes ahead and do the best that you can, you will get recognized for your work,
Very good. All right, so we have another question here. Did you ever deal with imposter syndrome, struggling, and discouragement in STEM due to course difficulties or perhaps something else? And if so, how are you able to push through?
Oh, yeah. Yes, the answer is yes. I think even now, everyone has a little bit of this imposter syndrome to some extent. But when you are young, and especially if you are a woman or if you are in an underrepresented group, you feel that all eyes are on you. You feel that there's an expectation not for success, but for failure or mediocrity or something along those lines. And although my hope is that in some quarters that has dissipated to some extent, it's still very present, especially in the world of science and engineering. So when I started at MIT, as I said, I encountered all of these brilliant people. I felt in that first 6 to 7 days on campus, people were talking about their SAT scores. Just routinely on elevators. You're on an elevator. What the heck? People are like, oh, yeah, I got, 1,600, blah, blah, blah. And like, wow, okay. So I thought, okay,
know that.
just in case, drop this in the elevator. And I remember thinking, wow, these people are amazing. And, how can I perform on the same level as them? There's no way. Admissions made a mistake. I need to call admissions now, tell them, okay, you need to just revoke me, But instead I thought, all right, I'm here. This is an opportunity I've been given. I am not going to focus on, Mr. 1600 in the elevator or the people who keep raising their hand. I'm thinking to myself, how do I feel comfortable in this work? And eventually I was able to sort of talk myself down to a point where I'm thinking, all right, the work is not impossible work. It is simply that is challenging. And I need to look at it that way. And I need to keep pulling at it and looking at it and piecing it apart until I get to the bits and pieces that I can understand. And if I need to work with a tutor to do that, I will. If I need to ask somebody else for help, I will. Humility helps a lot. I did not have a problem looking for help and finding help, people who are very willing to help explain things to me. And I also did not hesitate to talk to friends and just open up, hey, I feel like incredibly inadequate here. Oh, I feel inadequate too. You will find that a number of your friends are feeling this too. And that sometimes people are dropping these numbers in elevators because they feel inadequate. So in the end, focusing, as I was saying, on finding peers that can work with you and help you feel like you're a part of a unit, a community, helps a huge amount because that helps your sense of belonging. And using your own personal self-gauge, did I learn something today? Did I move forward today? Can help you talk to yourself about who you are and what you are achieving. It's not about whether or not you achieved as much as, as Joe's, SAT or GRE. You really want to just compare yourself to yourself and continue to move yourself forward. Once you realize that this is all really about learning, and this is something that you already love, that's why you're at school, then you can kind of relax the rest of the imposter syndrome. You recognize that we're really all humans here. We're bringing our thoughts and our ideas together to try and create something, and every one of your voices counts, every one of them. Then you begin to feel more comfortable.
Awesome. Very good. Okay, so maybe our last question for the night is related to grad school apps. This attendee also says that, first of all, she wants to say, your smile is so contagious. So she thanks you for that as well. So any advice you have as far as applying to grad school in engineering and kind of what faculty are looking for in that?
Yes, absolutely. You really want to have people writing your recommendation letters who have excitement about you and who you are. And basically, you may not recognize how much those recommendation letters count, but as we are looking at graduate admissions applications, we're really looking for not just the GPA and not just the list of organizations and so forth, but who is this person? Do they have that energy and that drive or that enthusiasm to really dive into their graduate career? So when you ask for letters, ask the faculty members with whom you've worked closely so that they can talk about the work you've done. but make sure that they have enough of an idea of who you are as a person, that they see your enthusiasm, they see your drive, and talk to them. Give them, a little bit of a synopsis of why you're excited about grad school, and those letter writers will be able to incorporate that into their letters. We definitely like to have letters, at least one or two, hopefully two, with research experiences. That may not be possible for everyone. If not, then make sure that you have one really strong one for research, and have some really strong ones that speak to other characteristics that relate to being successful in the lab, such as persistence, which is a really key one in the lab, or innovation, or creativity. And I think the reference letters are really important. Other than that, I would say do spend time on your essay. Compose an essay that gives a good idea of who you are as a person and what motivates you and where you want to go. You don't have to name, the specific field or subfield of the department that you're applying to. You simply need to indicate what is driving you toward graduate school and the kinds of things that you love to explore. So it can be very personal, and I think showing that part of yourself is critical. I should mention that, for example, at MIT and a number of our departments, we have these programs in which there are buddies or graduate students who are able to help you with the writing of your application and your essay, and we'll go over it for you. They're not a part of our admissions process, so we don't know what's going on there. It's blind to us. But the program in chemical engineering is called ChemE. There's one for biological engineering, and there's one for material science and engineering. And the students are simply volunteering to help you because they've had successful applications to help your application become, the best that it can possibly be.
Very good. Wow. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground. You've shared a lot of great advice and incredible experiences and stories with us. So thank you so much for all of that. Is there anything else you want to leave us with? Any parting words?
I would just say persist. I know you all have wonderful ideas and you have great careers in front of you. So persist. Continue. Remember, you do belong, and we need to hear your voice in science and engineering. And I hope to see you. I hope to see you in the future.
Very good. Wonderful. Well, Dr. Hammond, thank you again. This has been incredible. And our attendees, thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you next time. So take care, everyone. Hang in there.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Take care.